Sometimes the best way to really get your head around a big news story isn't just about the facts, it's about the words. Today, we're going to dig into how 3 specific words, ransack, grapple, and exile, do a lot more than just describe the energy crisis in Cuba. They actually shape how we understand the entire situation.
Okay, let's kick things off with a headline that really got me thinking. It's from BBC News, and it is a fantastic example of how much story can be squeezed into so few words. Just this one sentence paints a picture of conflict, of desperation, and deep political tension. It's going to be our key to unlocking everything else.
So here's our game plan for today. First, we need to get the basic context. What's actually happening in Cuba that's leading to all this? Then we're going to put on our detective hats and break down 3 really powerful words from the headlines: ransack, grapple, and exile. And finally, we'll pull it all together and see why these little details matter so much. Let's jump in.
So before we can even touch the vocabulary, we have to understand what's going on the ground. What's the real-world situation that's sparking these headlines in the first place?
Well, what the sources are describing is basically a powder keg. It all starts with electricity blackouts. Huge parts of the day without power. But that's just the trigger. That frustration is being poured onto a fire of severe shortages of the basics. We're talking food, fuel, and medicine. And a huge piece of this puzzle, as the slide points out, is a U.S. blockade on oil, which is making it incredibly difficult for the country to function.
Let's just pause for a second on that word, blockade. That is a heavy term. This isn't just the shipping problem. A blockade, by definition, is a deliberate act of sealing a place off. It's strategic. It's about applying pressure. So when sources point to a U.S. blockade, they're framing these shortages not as some unfortunate accident, but as the result of a specific policy. That context changes everything.
And if you want to understand the human cost, just look at this number, 15. Not 15 minutes, 15 hours a day without power in the capital. Can you imagine? This isn't about not being able to charge your phone. This is about hospitals struggling. It's about food spoiling. It's about life becoming a constant daily struggle. This is the reality pushing people to protest. Okay, so now that we have that picture in our minds, let's circle back to that first headline. Now we can really dig into our first key word, which is all about describing the action of the protesters.
Here it is again. I want you to focus on that one verb, ransack. Think about it. The reporter could have chosen other words, right? They could have said protesters damaged the office or broke into it, but they chose ransack. So what does that specific choice tell us?
Well, the dictionary definition tells us it's about a violent, careless search. It paints a picture of pure chaos. It's not just breaking a window, it's tearing a place apart, total disorder. By using this word, the headline immediately frames the protest as something destructive and out of control, which lines up with reports of fires and thrown rocks.
But here's what's so interesting about a word like ransack. In the news, it means something serious, something violent. But you might say, I ransacked my entire apartment looking for my keys this morning. The core action, a frantic, messy search, is the same, but the context, the stakes, are completely different. The headline is using that serious, violent meaning on purpose to frame the event for us.
And it's so important to remember that none of this is happening in a vacuum. The tension between the U.S. and Cuba goes back decades. You've got the revolution in the 50s, the sanctions in the 60s. It's been a really long, complicated relationship. The current blockade isn't just some random event. It's the latest chapter in a story that's been going on for more than half a century.
Okay, so from the action of the protesters, let's zoom out. Let's shift our focus to the struggle of the entire nation. And that brings us to our second word.
Now check out this headline from Al Jazeera. It says the island itself grapples with the blackout. See the shift in perspective? We're not talking about a small group's actions anymore. This is about a national struggle.
So let's break this word down. Grapple is, at its core, a really physical word. I want you to picture 2 wrestlers, locked together, every muscle straining. It's an up-close and personal fight for control. It's about being tangled up with something you just can't shake loose. So when a headline says that Cuba is grappling with a blackout, it's using that physical fight as a really powerful metaphor. It suggests the entire country is wrestling with this huge, overwhelming problem, desperately trying to get control. It communicates this feeling of immense effort and difficulty, all in a single word.
All right, on to our final word. For this one, we're shifting focus again. We're moving away from the action on the streets and looking at a different group of people who are part of this story, those who live outside Cuba.
So, in the middle of this crisis, the Cuban government makes a pretty big move to try and help its economy.
They officially invite Cubans who are living in other countries to come back and invest. And the word the media uses to describe this group is really, really important.
And there it is. Take a look at the word Reuters chose, exiles. They didn't say immigrants. They didn't say Cubans living abroad. They chose exiles, a word that is just loaded with political and historical meaning.
So, what is an exile? The definition really gets to the heart of it. This isn't just about someone who moved for a new job opportunity. The word exile implies force. It suggests a separation from your home country that was probably not your choice, and it's almost always tied to politics. It's a word that's full of history, conflict, and a lot of personal pain.
And the word has all these different shades of meaning. You can be in exile, you can be forced into exile, or you can be a political exile. The source material even mentions internal exile, which is when someone is forced to move within their own country. By using this one word, the headline instantly connects this new economic policy to a very long, very painful history of political division.
Okay, so we've looked at this crisis through the lens of 3 words: ransack, grapple, and exile. What's the big takeaway here? Why did we do this?
Here's the bottom line. These words aren't just describing things, they're directing how we see them. Ransack directs us to see violence. Grapple directs us to see a massive national struggle. And exile directs us to remember a painful political history. These word choices act like a lens, focusing our attention on certain things while pushing others into the background. They don't just report the news, they help build the reality we see.
So I want to leave you with a challenge. The next time you're reading an article or scrolling through headlines, just pause for a second. Look past the basic who, what, where, and look at the words. Ask yourself, why did they choose this word and not a different one? What story is it really trying to tell me? Because as we've seen today, sometimes the most powerful part of the news isn't the event itself, but the language we use to talk about it.